There have been a number of interesting court cases that have captured the imaginations of many Canadians. We want to try and sort through some of them today with media commentator and Toronto lawyer Ari Goldkind. Welcome back to BCN, Ari.
Great to be back on with you.
Now let's begin with one of the biggest election promises in Alberta, that is to scrap the carbon tax and to challenge it in court. A number of other provinces, including where you are in Ontario, are doing this right now. What are the chances of success?
I don't think there's a great chance of success on a legal basis here. And people should remember, this wasn't done for legal reasons. This is very much politicizing an issue for votes to get people riled up. Once it enters into the courtroom, it's a different fray. And you got a sneak preview of that when cameras were allowed in the Ontario Court of Appeal courtroom, where Ford lawyers faced a very hostile panel, essentially raising what I've just said, that there's a lot of politics involved here, but legally it seems well within the Trudeau government's rights to do what they're doing. And you have out west, you have the same argument sort of being floated, but at the end of the day, this gets into simple constitutional issues about who can regulate commerce, who can regulate trade. And I think the provinces who want to walk into courtrooms and say what Trudeau is doing is illegal, I think they have a very uphill battle in front of them.
That's what I was going to ask you. I mean, aren't the provinces saying that this is unconstitutional? The feds don't have the right to do this, especially if we have our own maybe carbon tax plan?
Well, that's one of the problems, is that they say they have a plan. Ford doesn't have a plan in my province, and Jason Kenney has been very tight-lipped about his plan there, other than railing against the carbon tax. The argument that they're saying in a nutshell is they can regulate their own reserves of oil, of gas, etc. But when you look at it really from an overall constitutional point, depoliticized, provinces cannot discriminate against other provinces. And Mr. Kenney has been very brazen about his enmity against BC. He's gone even further than the NDP. That will raise issues with judges. And when it comes to trade and commerce, that really is federal domain or dominion. So while the promise is very attractive, the turning off the taps thing, the killing the carbon tax, it is really done to get his base riled up. And look, he won. This was a very clever promise. But as we know from politicians who overpromise and underdeliver, courts might say, that's great in the arena that you work in, but in the arena we work in, the law is pretty clear that you can't thumb your nose at BC any more than BC can thumb their nose at you.
Well, let me ask you something, because the NDP in Alberta came up with that Bill 12 with the potential to turn off the taps to British Columbia. And like you said, Jason Kenney's threatening to do such. So how does this work? Does he actually have the legal right and ability to do this to another province?
So the short answer of the how is no, but here's how he says he could do it. In Bill 12, there's abilities to regulate the licenses of the energy exports or exporters, where they export, how they do it, how much they do it on a daily basis. But Kenney, because he's been so open about what he's doing, is clearly sending a flag to a court that this is really a discriminatory use of the reserves that he has in Alberta, and a court might say you can't do that. But the how is really interesting, by him sort of monkeying with these licenses, and if the exporters and energy producers don't comply, he then can take away their licenses. I think even for energy providers who are looking to make a buck here, being told they can't export their goods to where it's gone for decades and years, that will even cause a problem with people who you would think are loyal to Mr. Kenney.
You know, it's interesting too, a lot of friends and family that I have in the Okanagan in British Columbia, they're very much in favor of the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion. It seems like a select few, more so on the coast and maybe on the island, that have more of an issue with it. But people I spoke to in the interior, they're very much in favor of this pipeline. Now, still with politics, let's talk a bit about Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and threatening a libel suit against Andrew Scheer, saying the guy's a liar. You know what? I'm going to stick my lawyers on you. Scheer says to Trudeau, come on, bring it on. I want to see you testify under oath about the SNC-Lavalin scandal.
So here's why I like the fact that Justin Trudeau did it. And it won't affect most people, but there's a bigger message here. Trudeau is the prime minister. He gets trolled all day on anti-social media. Everybody calls him every name in the book. That is a very different thing than the leader of the opposition, a future potential prime minister, calling Justin Trudeau a criminal. And to me, Words matter. This is a government from Trudeau to SCHEER to Jagmeet Singh that say words matter. Mr. Singh just wrote a book full of words that are very important for people to process. The reason I say that is it becomes a bit of a stretch to say it's fair comment to say Trudeau broke laws when Jody Wilson-Raybould, literally the horse's mouth, as much as she doesn't like being bugged or pressured about SNC-Lavalin, when she was under oath and she was asked, did Trudeau do anything illegal? Her answer was no. So for Andrew Scheer to come out and call him corrupt and he essentially belongs behind bars, if I was Trudeau, I like the principle. That being said, as a political move, I think it's kind of weak. I always think it looks weak when you run to the lawyers rather than running to the electorate.
Yeah, I mean, political posturing going on right now, and won't Andrew Scheer and the Tories use this to their advantage as we lead up to the October 21st federal election?
I think they could, and Andrew Scheer may have some wind in his sails, but there's two big questions I would ask if I was Justin Trudeau. Forget this virtue signaling, forget this everybody is racist, all right, white nationalist nonsense that Trudeau puts out. Point out two simple facts. What does Andrew Scheer actually stand for? Nobody seems to know what he stands for, but for this wind in his sails about SNC-Lavalin. And number two, some good enterprising journalist really needs to get the notes of Andrew Scheer's private, closed-door meetings last year with SNC-Lavalin. What was Andrew Scheer talking about? The hockey playoffs? I'd like to know why Andrew Scheer has gotten a pass, but do I think Trudeau has sort of manned up in a way and say, you can call me a bunch of names, but I'm not going to be called a criminal by you? I think there are lessons there for all of us who are keyboard warriors when fair criticism becomes improper slander and libel.
I think you hit the nail on the head earlier when you said Justin Trudeau, because he's the Prime Minister, that's why he's under the microscope that much more. If Scheer was Prime Minister, I think you can be sure that he'd be blasted that much more as well, as opposed to opposition leader. Now, what about the Admiral Mark Norman case? His legal team is up against the federal government and is trying to gain access to secret government documents. It seems the government has been very reluctant to hand the documents over to the defense, which maybe doesn't seem fair. What's going on here, Ari?
And again, full disclosure, I am a criminal defense lawyer, so I'll put my bias on the table here. I don't love the word secret. We're not talking trade secrets here. We're not talking gunships into Afghanistan. We're not talking WikiLeaks. We're not talking about the safety of undercover people, CIA, FBI, Tom Clancy stuff. If you're going to charge Mark Norman with something that is very defensible and something that was on the edge of ever even being charged, how do you then run to a court and say, convict this man, ruin his reputation, take away his freedom, make him have to pay his lawyer hundreds of thousands of dollars? But if there's documents that show we've been talking about this prosecution, we've been sending emails about should we charge him? Did he do something wrong? Are we covering? How do you have a fair trial system in Canada when that can't be turned over to the defense? And remember, for people to understand, let's say I'm wrong and these are really secretive documents. There's a procedure in our courts where this can be turned over to the trial judge. And the trial judge in his or her office can look at these materials and say, you know what? This was a fishing expedition. The defense team doesn't need these, shouldn't have them. But my view is to not even allow a judge to see them to determine relevance. That goes to the heart of fair answer and defense, which most people listening to us chat about this won't care until they're charged with something and they need to defend themselves with something the government is hiding.
Now, I believe this trial starts in August. Do you think maybe this will hurt Justin Trudeau and the Liberals heading up to the fall election?
I actually don't think the Mark Norman story, as much as it's covered on a big Canadian network funded by taxpayers, I don't think it has any wind in the sails of the electorate. I don't think most people could tell you who Mark Norman is. I don't think most people can tell you what Mark Norman is charged with doing. I think SNC-Lavalin seemed to be a bit juicier of a story to a lot of people, but come late summer, early August, late August, I'm not so sure that the Mark Norman story will be what we're talking about, or more importantly, the reason people are going to the polls to vote for or against somebody.
National Post reporter Christy Blatchford wrote a story regarding the trial of former Afghan hostage Joshua Boyle and his estranged wife, Caitlin Coleman. Now, there's been some changes in sexual assault law that could profoundly affect many sexual assault cases. Can you explain this for our viewers?
Yes, and anybody who hasn't seen the Christy Blatchford article in the National Post a couple days ago really should understand it and read it. It's great to go Google and read it. It's a very important article by a very talented writer. And here's what it is in a nutshell. As much as I think Boyle and Coleman are like crazy and who knows what they were doing in Afghanistan, and I don't buy and drink their Kool-Aid for 1 second. I wouldn't have been upset if both of them remained where they went to. Mr. Boyle is charged with very serious sexual assaults, particularly anal intercourse, on his wife. Now, why do I say that? Because the question that Mr. Boyle's lawyer wanted to ask Miss Coleman, his wife, was, isn't this something you guys did as part of your normal bedroom repertoire? You've done it in the past. It's part of your lovemaking, according to the defense. To then stop Mr. Boyle's lawyer from being able to ask that question when it really goes to the heart of the defense. We've been doing it for years. Now you're upset at me because we have a fight. Now it's sex assault. The reason we don't allow certain sexual assault questions to be asked in Canada is to suggest that women who dress a certain way are less worthy of belief, or women who have slept with number of people in their lives means that they're going to choose to sleep with the next guy. I'm putting it in a simple way. But when it goes to the heart of defending yourself as part of the pattern with your own wife, Mr. Boyle's lawyer was stopped by Miss Coleman's lawyer that says, you can't ask me that question, and I'm going to bring an application to a higher court to say that is not fair game. And for anybody charged with sex assault, particularly in the Me Too era, the government has bent over backwards, pun sort of intended, to make it harder for accused people charged with sex assault to defend themselves. And even though Twitter and Facebook like the idea that everybody accused gets convicted, I don't like the idea that people who are accused can't defend themselves properly. We'll see what a higher court says, but that's where the saga lies, and Christy Blatchford really wrote a very important article about this.
So let me ask you something. What options is the Boyle defense team left with then?
So where it is right now is that they're making an application to a superior court in what's called a certiorari motion. It means getting a writ that this can or can't be asked. But what's interesting today, literally a few hours before you and I talked, is the lawyer for Miss Coleman originally said, if I don't like the decision I'm going to get at the higher court, I might appeal this to an even higher court and then the Supreme Court. The lawyer today says, I'll accept what the higher court says. The problem on a bigger scale here is our federal government has made it harder based on changes to the law that nobody has really paid attention to, hasn't gotten enough media play. Harvey Weinstein gets play, Kevin Spacey gets play, Jian Ghomeshi gets play, but if you're an average Joe across Canada and somebody falsely accuses you of rape or sexual assault, your federal government has made it harder for you to defend yourself, and no matter what side of the fence you're on politically, that should concern you, and that's really the heart of what's going on in Boyle and Coleman, because remember, he's not suggesting she's promiscuous, he's not suggesting she has slept around, he is simply wanting to suggest this is our repertoire, and she has said that should be off limits.
Ari, there's been a lot of talk about actor Jussie Smollett allegedly staging the story of the racist hate crime attack on him. And now, an incident in Winnipeg. The three owners of the Burmax Cafe reported a hate crime, robbery, and vandalism, but police have since charged the owners with public mischief. Now, tell us exactly what happened here and why is this bad for everyone?
So let's go back to Smollett, because I'll make a link between Smollett, as your question did, with what happened in Winnipeg. First of all, what Smollett did is ridiculous. He should be behind bars. He should never have had his charges dropped. The idea that he's a victim or a martyr is sickening. We live in a politically correct culture where he did 15 stupid fake community service hours for Jesse Jackson's coalition, forfeited some of his bond, and when he was guilty, and the evidence shows he's guilty for a series of political reasons, his charges were dropped. Let's now move to Winnipeg, where so many thousands of police hours, hundreds of them, so many people got their backs in a way bent out of shape about this, suggesting a virulent anti-Semitic crime perpetrated against them. Now, full disclosure, my name is Ari Goldkind, I'm Jewish. I hate the idea that 3 Jewish people would have come up with such a hoax to make all of us look back. It nauseates me. I think these people should be punished. But as I joked the other day on what I call anti-social media, are these people going to be able to do 15 stupid community service hours and pay $1,000 and get their charges dropped? No. I think the Winnipeg Police Service and the Crown attorneys in Winnipeg will prosecute this in a way that Smollett should have been prosecuted. I don't think these 3 deserve a free pass. We don't yet know the reason fully why they did it, and as a defense lawyer, I want to know that. But these kinds of hoaxes are critically important to the descent, in my view, of identity politics and who's hated more, and this Islamophobia word that I have concerns with. I just think when people do this sort of thing, no different, Hal, than calling 911 when 911 shouldn't be called. It is public mischief. It affects communities, and it wastes so much police man and woman time that could be used for so many other things. There should be a punishment for these 3, no different than Smollett should have been punished.
Ari Goldkind, a criminal defense lawyer and media commentator, and always a pleasure having you on the show. Thanks again for joining me from Toronto.
Thank you so much.